In one of my previous live streams, I've had a few people come up and ask me, what exactly are send and return tracks? I've never actually made a video on this topic, so I thought I might dive into this today. So here I prepared a little chart. Before we dive into Ableton Live, I just want to quickly illustrate how I approach this whole send and return thing. So ultimately on the left, you have your instruments that are dry, meaning that there's no effects to them. And on the right, you have your return channels with the effects, meaning that you have a small room reverb, which is this little black circle. Then you have a larger spacey reverb, which is this big blue circle. And then you got the delay. That's also similar to how I have it set up in my DAW. So if you want the vocals and the drums, for example, to be put into the same room, you can send them into return channel A. So you send, right? These are the sends. You send the dry signal, the unaffected signal, into return channel A, and return channel A will return a fully affected signal. But for example, if you want your synths to be in the larger space, you can then send them into return channel B. If you wanted to, you could also put the vocals into return channel B. So you could go like this and process these together with your synths. So you could take away this part and now you'd have just the drums going to return channel A and the synths and vocals being applied by this big reverb. So you can mix and match and see what suits you the most. But usually I have the vocals and synths being applied by the same large reverb space because I like it when it sounds large and spacey. And I've put together a small list of benefits of why it makes sense to have these send and returns in your setup or in your DAW. The first 2 points are it saves time and it helps muscle memory. Here I have an Ableton Live session with the tracks on the left, the instruments that have no effects applied to them whatsoever. And here you get to see these return channels and you can create them by right-clicking insert return track. And you also get to see the command for that here. So I have a reverb small, a reverb spacey, an echo, which is practically a delay, and another experimental channel over here, which we'll keep minimized for now. So by creating these templates, I save time. I don't always have to find this particular effect and tweak the settings to where it matches my sound or the way I like it to sound, because I've already put those into my template and this will save time. Rather than having to use a different reverb in each session, I get used to one reverb that I know works and I like. I get used to tweaking the settings, tweaking the parameters, seeing what type of a sound it gives me before moving on to, let's say, another plugin. So it helps you build muscle memory and helps you save time. Next point is it saves you CPU and it gives you less overall latency. Imagine you have a plugin like Black Hole, which is on my return channel B, which is a large and spacey reverb. In the bottom left corner here, you can see how much latency it's adding, which is 8 samples. Imagine having to copy this black hole and you put it on each and every single track the way I'm doing it right now. Those little latencies, the 8 samples, they add up, meaning that you'll get a lot of latency if you add the effects that otherwise would have been on the sends onto your instruments here. So it helps you save CPU and it reduces latency. It gives you consistency in mixing and a cleaner sound. So what I mean by this is that, of course, if you, for example, have the hats over here and you have some tops, and you want the same effect on them, you could just crank up send A. So we're basically sending these into A here. And now they're being applied by the same effect, the same style or type of reverb, meaning that it gives us the feeling that the sounds are unified. They're in the same room, giving you an overall cohesive mix. Being able to split your send from the original signal rather than having it on the track itself, additionally gives you the opportunity to process them separately. Right here, you can see I have an EQ on my reverb, giving me a really thin signal. Now this is optional because I see this reverb already has a built-in EQ. See how it sounds if I just EQ the send here. So I get additional control over just the affected signal. But do keep in mind, in order for this to work, all of the effects that are put onto your return channels need to be set to 100% wet. So every effect that you see here, whether it be the large spacey black hole or the small convolution reverb or the echo, the delay, is always set to 100% because we want the return channels to return us only the affected signal, our sends, this basically becomes the dry wet, yeah? This guy over here. This also enables creativity. Enable live, I don't know how this is in other DAWs. You can enable chains. So for example, if you want the small room reverb to be routed into the spacey reverb, you can right click send B and enable send. So this means that right now you can route this reverb into this channel over here. If you, for some reason, need to route your small room reverb into the large spacey reverb, you can do it. So it's really creative as well. But I would rather chain these in a different way. So I would put the small room reverb into the experimental channel instead of send B. I could right click my send D, enable it, crank it up. So now whatever's coming through reverb small is now routed into channel D, which has this very weird experimental plugin called Valhalla Frequency Echo. Which could also give you some really weird results for sake of sound design. And it just gives you an overall more organized session. So rather than having, again, 100 of effects split onto all the individual channels with automation all over the place, you get to put your essential effects that you use all the time on one particular channel and get to control everything via the send over here. All right, so I'm going to play everything together so you know how it sounds. Vocals dry, no effects to it. Also chords feel somewhat dry. Now if I crank these into my sends B, down back a bit, more on the chords. Maybe some delay on the vocals and chords as well. That's literally all I have to do. Rather than having to load the plugin, put it on the channel, set everything up, I already have everything set up in my template this way. And I know it works, it sounds good. And again, the hats, tops, and the tribal drums, I can just fully send those into A. And if that's too much, I can dial it down. Yeah. Another reverb that I use a lot for small room reverbs is called Raum by Native Instruments. Just to show you how I would approach it, I'd just load it onto the track directly. I will mute the Convolution Reverb Pro, set it to 100% dry wet, and lock the dry wet here. Can lock the button. And I think this is also free. It has a few different algorithms. One's called Airy, which is great for vocals, Cosmic, which is great for large synths and spacey stuff. And you got Grounded, which is great for drums. You can just dial down the decay, the size, and see how it sounds. Great sounding reverb. You can also try putting your vocals and chords into the small room reverb to see if you'd rather like it to be all tied together. Maybe give it just a hint of send B. You can kind of mix and match along the way too. Awesome. So I'm going to mute all of the sends now. This is how it sounded before. Pretty dry. And with the send and returns, there we go. Nice. Yeah. And the cool thing about sends is that it's very practical for automation, specifically in build-ups. So let's say you want to automate your drums into the large and spacey reverb during a build-up. So I'm going to take all my drums or the tops and put them into a group. Command G, call this one build drums or whatever. So let's say all of your tracks are playing at the same time. and you want to create a build-up. So you chuck your drums into return channel B using send B. And then once the chorus or the drop hits, you can suddenly bring it back down. So it's great for build-ups. You could also put them all into C, which is a delay. And the great thing is that if you suddenly put down the channel like this, the echo or the reverb still fades out. If you would have the effect directly on the channel itself, it would just suddenly cut. Sometimes that might be a desired effect, but sometimes you want the reverb or delay tails to fade into the drop or the chorus. So let's try that again. Let's play all of our tracks. I'm gonna automate the drums here. Pause the kick and the vocal. So imagine this is like a little build up here before the drop. Getting a bit of goosebumps here. And you suddenly pull them back down and hit play again. So you get a smoother transition into the drop because the delay and reverb tails, they slowly fade out even though you suddenly crank down that send. And that's, I would say, the top reason why I love using send and returns. Simply for the sake of having this automation and the ability to have those tails fade out. It's very, very practical. So today was more of an explanation video. I hope you still enjoyed. If you did, like and subscribe. You can grab all these sounds on LotusTunes.com, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.